All right, welcome everybody to our webinar today. My name is Ryan Evans with the Center for Agricultural Profitability here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And today is, of course, part of our regular webinar series, which typically happens at this time every Thursday, noon Central. And you can check out a full schedule and an archive of past webinars on our website at cap.unl.edu. And today we're looking forward to having a great presentation on checkbook registers, which is something that many of us carry, although we may not be the best at maintaining it properly. So we'll hear today some simple steps that can improve the usefulness of this everyday tool. And we'll have a review of best management practices for keeping your checkbook register up to date and a demonstration of how it can be a simple way to get a better grip on your finances. And to present for us, we're glad to have with us again, Jessica Groskopf, an extension ag economist with the Center for Ag Profitability here at UNL. So Jessica, it's all yours.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today. And I'm really excited to share with you about dusting off your checkbook register. Like Ryan said, I think it's something that we carry around and sometimes we take for granted that it's something that we should keep up to date and should be managing on a regular basis. So today we're going to go over kind of some basic management practices as well as tips and tricks to improve your financial record keeping as a whole. So first, where do you get a checkbook register? And often a checkbook register comes with your checks. You can also pick one up for free at your local bank. You can create one in Excel, or Nebraska Extension has one available online that you can download. It's a PDF that you can print as many as you would like. So there's lots of opportunities for receiving one. I would say you probably don't need to pay for one because there's lots of free opportunities there to get one for you. So why do we need a checkbook register? And check registers give you a real-time record of your account balance. And this is really important. Even in today's world of mobile banking, online banking, there's still the possibility that you have checks or deposits that are outstanding, and therefore your bank account does not reflect the actual transactions that you have authorized. So it's really important that we maintain a checkbook register. So the first couple steps for maintaining a checkbook register, I'm going to lump together, and that's entering transactions and balancing your checkbook register. I do have an article online that outlines all of this information. You can scan the QR code, or you can go to the article link. By the way, these slides will be posted online with a recording of the presentation on our website at cap.unl.edu. So you can also join us, visit back to our website and get this link there as well. So let's start with entering transactions. And the first question is really, what is a transaction? And the definition is an instance of buying or selling something, but we need to expand that for a checkbook register to include a debit or a credit to an account. And another way to say that is any withdrawal or deposit to an account. So one of the things I think that gets missed a lot are things like fees or interest that is automatically posted to your bank account. Those transactions need to be reported in your checkbook register. So we need to think about that broader definition of a transaction. So there are two systems to enter transactions. And first, we're going to look at the one-line system. And this is the typical system that you were probably taught. And so as we move from left to right on your screen, the first thing that you're going to enter is the check number or code. So there's lots of different ways that this can be done. And I'll show you some example codes for deposits, transfers, those kinds of things. So we're going to enter that in that first column. The second column is the date of the transaction, then the transaction description, which is typically the payee name. And then finally, what you're going to enter is the payment or deposit amount. Okay. And typically the payment amount is in the column to the left and the deposit is in the column to the right. And then what you will do is add or subtract that payment or deposit to the initial account balance on the previous line. So when you start out a checkbook register, you're going to start by writing the current account balance in the very top right of the checkbook register, and then record each transaction on a separate line. And make sure that you are accurately recording and calculating that balance. So here's an example of what that looks like. Here we wrote check number 233 on June 29th to the local farm store for the amount of $8,933. So to calculate the balance, we're going to subtract that $8,933 from the initial balance of $56,932.90. So we're going to keep this running balance. And I find that a lot of folks will record the transaction, but they won't calculate the balance. And I think that's really important, again, for keeping us up to date with how much money is actually available to you within that account. So I mentioned earlier that we can use the check number, or we can use a code. And you can use basically any code that you would like, but here are some standard codes that you could use. So an automatic deposit could be AD. The other ones that I see a lot are ATMs, service charges, deposits. And I'm seeing more and more EFTs, or electronic funds transfers. So again, your bank might use some of these as you look at your bank statement, but you also need to be recording these within your checkbook register and be consistent in the codes or abbreviations that you use. As I mentioned previously, automatic deposits and withdrawals are often omitted from the checkbook register, and it's really important that you record these. Why is it important? An unrecorded deposit will mean that your checkbook register will understate your balance. Okay. The one we're more concerned about is an unrecorded withdrawal or debit will overstate your balance. So there's a higher chance in that scenario of overdrafting your account. So we want to make sure, especially with automatic deposits and withdrawals, that we are recording them and making sure that our checkbook register balance is then accurate. So here's an example of a transaction that doesn't necessarily have a check number. Here we have a deposit on that same date to the local bank in the amount of $10,000. Again, we calculated the running total here, this time by adding $10,000 to the balance. Now there's one column I haven't talked about yet, and that's this small column in between the payment and the deposit columns. And this is the cleared check column. And usually this is a place where you can see whether or not that transaction is showing up on the bank statements. So the question is, when do I record the actual transaction versus when is it cleared? And we want to record those transactions when the check is written, the deposit is made, or the transaction is authorized. So when I'm standing at the counter and at the local feed store, I'm going to go ahead and record that transaction right then and there, even though it might take the feed store a few days to then go ahead and deposit that check into their account, therefore making a withdrawal on yours. So again, we're going to use that center column then to mark when that transaction actually clears. And this is especially important for those checks that are written towards the end of a month, where it might be that they don't get recorded on your next bank statement. Okay? But you should do this for every transaction. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use that center column between those two, between the payment and deposit columns, to know whether or not that transaction was cleared. So if today was June 29th and I had written a check to the local farm store and made a deposit at the bank, I'm going to leave those boxes blank until I see either online or in my paper statement that those transactions have cleared the bank. The next type of system is a two-line system. So we talked about the one line, pretty standard, but I really like the two-line system because it adds more detail. So here's an example, and I'm going to go across the top. There's two ways, so I'm going to talk about the top and the bottom here. So as we look at the top, same setup on the unshaded line here, right? Check number, date, payee, and the amount with the balance. But on the shaded line, what happens is we can enter a little bit more information, the tax category and the memo line. Now, the other way that you can do this, and I've seen done, might help, especially with somebody who's younger, who's trying to figure out how to calculate the balances, would be they set up the top line almost the same, but then they carry over the payment or deposit amount on that white line. So they make, in this example, it was a payment, so they carry that over as a negative and then calculate the new balance in the shaded area. So just to give you an example, it's the same check 233 that we saw before. As you can see at the top, the white line looks the same. If we go to the bottom, this time the white line, we carried over the debit amount of $8,933 and then calculated the new balance in the shaded area. So I don't think it matters which of those happens, which one you prefer, but I do like the idea of adding more information to our checkbook register. You might be saying, Jessica, why do you care about a two-line register? For many farm and ranch operations, I see that the person who is doing the books might be different than the person who's actually physically writing the checks. So this is a really important opportunity just to get a few more details in there, help that person who's doing the books really get an understanding of what was purchased. So as we look here, we went to that local farm store, and that could be a myriad of items that was purchased there. So here we know that the person who wrote the check and entered the transaction in the checkbook register expects that to be supplies, and then a little bit more detail that was for fencing. So again, it just gives you more information related to what was happening. So it's really an interesting way to set up your checkbook register, and an opportunity, especially if there are multiple people who are dealing with the finances of an operation, to learn more about that transaction. So the next step in managing our checkbook register is to reconcile. And reconciling is something that I think most of us forget. And if there's nothing that you take away from today, the one thing you should take away is please reconcile your accounts. The best way to improve your financial management is to reconcile. So what is reconciling? Reconciling is the process of making sure that one record of a financial account is consistent with another record. So typically when I see farm and ranch operations, they have the bank statements, they have a checkbook register, and potentially some sort of financial software. So today we're going to focus in particular on the bank statements and the checkbook register, but know if you have financial software, you need to do this for that as well. So how often should you be reconciling? And the answer is monthly. So reconciling, what we're going to do is we're going to do that every time those bank statements come in. So we're going to reconcile those usually on a monthly basis at minimum. So the first step to reconciling is comparing your invoices and your receipts and your bills to your bank statements. So you're going to check each transaction on the bank statement for accuracy against the respective deposit slip, receipt, or invoice. And is the amount of each transaction correct? if the bank makes an error, you need to notify them about the mistake. So step number one, compare that pile of receipts to the bank statement. One of the challenges that I see with farms and ranches is actually having all of those bills and invoices in a place every month that they can be reconciled. One of my recommendations to help you with that is to get a shoebox or a boot box and put it somewhere convenient. So put it on top of the dryer, or put it in the shop, or put it in the pickup. And that is where all of those go. So when the person who's reconciling needs that documentation, they can go to that location and are able then to reconcile that information. The next step is to repeat this process of comparing those receipts and invoices then to your check register. And here, if you're like me, your check register gets a little messy, because what I will do is I'll make a check mark next to each payment or deposit to make sure that the amount was correct, and then make sure the balance was correct. So it depends on who you are. Some folks will put that either to the left of the column, or we'll just put it on the right, to the right of the balance. Doesn't matter, but finding some way to denote that that transaction was entered properly. So the next step is to compare then the bank statements to the checkbook register, and we're going to enter any uncleared or outstanding transactions that have not been recognized by the bank onto a reconciliation worksheet. And I want to pause here real fast, and I'm going to show you what a reconciliation worksheet looks like. Let me pull that up. So this is what a reconciliation worksheet looks like. So this is available from Nebraska Extension, and I'll give you the URL so that you can pull one up for yourself. Basically, at the top, there'll be a space for us to record any uncleared deposits, and then at the bottom to record any uncleared checks. And then down here, it'll have us calculate out what the adjusted bank balance should be. So let me switch back over to the other screen here. All right, so that reconciliation worksheet is an important component. So now we have all three documents side by side. When I'm working down the checkbook register, remember, I've already made sure that each of those transactions are correct, either by making a check mark next to the payment or deposit or to the balance. And now I'm using that cleared column to make sure that that transaction has been cleared. So here is an example where we received the June bank statement, and check number 233 has been cleared. So this is where that center column for check marks becomes important. So at the end of this process, what you will really have is this option where the bank statements equal the reconciliation worksheet. Okay, so the bank statements equal the reconciliation worksheet. And you should file a reconciliation worksheet with your bank statement, right? Just as good financial management. So where do you get a reconciliation worksheet? Typically, on most bank statements, they are printed on the back of the first page of the bank statement. You might have a bank statement for whatever reason that they're not printing that for you. You can create one in Excel, or you can download the one that I just showed you from our website. And with that, there is that article regarding reconciliation. So I think this can be kind of confusing. Reconciling takes a lot of practice. So I'm actually going to go dark here for about a minute, and I'm going to have you read the example on the screen. And if you've got a piece of scrap paper, what I would encourage you to do while you're reading is to write down 1 through 6 and determine whether that correction should be made in the check register or whether that correction should be made on the reconciliation worksheet. So again, I'm going to go quiet. I encourage you to write down 1 through 6, whether that correction will happen on the check register or on the reconciliation worksheet. So I'll be back here in just a minute. All right. At this point, I'd really like to encourage you, if you have any questions about what we're covering, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. So let's work through this example together. So John and Joan received their June bank statement. It contains that ending balance that's listed there on the top, but their check register has a different balance. So they found the following discrepancies. The first one is that John incorrectly recorded a deposit. He missed the 10 cents on the back end. Okay, so this is in the checkbook register, and we're going to create a correction entry for number 1 in the checkbook register. The next is that the bank statement shows a service charge of $15 that was not reflected then in the checkbook register, so we'll have to record that there as well. And interest income of $48. So that will also be entered into the checkbook register. On June 29th, they issued check number 233, and it has not cleared the bank. So a check that has not cleared the bank, we're going to put on their reconciliation worksheet. And then they also deposited $10,000 that did not appear on the bank statement. So that will go on the reconciliation worksheet. And finally, they had one of those automatic payments that was not recorded then in the checkbook register. So that's going to be recorded in the check register. So here we go. Just as a refresher, 1, 2, 3, and 6 will be recorded in the checkbook register, and 4 and 5 on the reconciliation worksheet. So what does this look like? So I showed you the reconciliation worksheet example that we have. And because we only have 1 uncleared deposit and 1 uncleared check, we can just use that box down in the bottom right hand of that sheet. So first, what we're going to do is record the ending bank balance, and that was $56,766. Then we are going to put in the uncleared deposit. So we're going to add back first. So that brings us up to that $66,000 number, and then subtract off that uncleared check number 233 for $8,933. So the adjusted bank balance is $57,843. Okay, So one of the things I think it's really important is remember to add before you subtract, and to lump those together. So make sure you've got the total sum of your uncleared deposits and the total sum of your uncleared checks when you work through this process. Next, we're going to work on that checkbook register, and the blue entries are going to be the correction entries. So again, they incorrectly recorded the deposit on June 5th. He missed 10 cents. So we go ahead and put in deposit, and we did the 10 cent mark here. The bank statement shows a service charge of $15. So that is a debit. And so we're going to subtract off $15. The bank statement shows the interest income. So we're going to deposit the interest income here for $48. And finally, we have that automatic payment that came out of our account for $190. Again, making the total $57,843. Now you will notice I did not clear check number 233 for the local farm store or the deposit of $10,000. Okay. The check marks there in the center of that column are not there because that has not cleared the bank yet. It's not showing up on that June bank statement. So it'll probably show up on the July statement. When it shows up on the July statement, then we will mark those as cleared. Okay. So you'll notice now that both of the balances are equal to one another. I would take that reconciliation worksheet and I would file it, staple it to my my bank statement so that I'm aware that we have balanced not only the checkbook, but the checkbook against the bank statement. So just a few other tips and tricks that I would like to share with you. First is supporting business documents, and it's vitally important that you have a record of those expenses that shows exactly what they were. So sometimes you guys are using checks potentially as tax documentation. And so we do really good with identifying the payee, the amount paid, and the date it was incurred. But the interesting piece is a description of the item that was purchased. So this is where that memo line on your check becomes really important. And then also then potentially recording that in the checkbook register using a 2-line system. So if you have a receipt, that's great, or an invoice, that's great. But then also potentially writing that on the check, just in case for whatever reason you can't find that invoice or receipt. You can read more about this. There's an IRS guide about small businesses and what kinds of records that you should keep. One of the things that I really like to do when I'm writing checks and working with them is to write the invoice number or the vendor account number on your check so that it starts to match up that documentation, creates more clarity, especially again, if the person who's writing checks is different than the person who's making the purchases. It just really helps that option. So I will write on the check, invoice number, whatever, really small in the memo line, and then supplies or whatever it's for. And then on the invoice, I'll write the check number. So it just allows you to match up that documentation more clearly. I think something that's really important, if you don't do this, you should, and that's to use duplicate checks and deposit slips that have that carbon copy sheet. So I know you can buy checks without that. It's probably cheaper, but having that carbon copy is really important. If you don't have a carbon copy, you can also have your bank print the image of that check on your statement. Again, that's up to you, but I think it just helps with what was that check written for, or did I write it correctly or not? The other thing that I've learned when you're looking at checks, the bank actually will use, they won't use that little white box that's there on the right where you write the dollar amount. They actually follow the longer line under it where you write out how much the amount was. Okay, so if there's a discrepancy between the white box and the line that was written, they're going to go with the written out line. So just fun little tidbit for you on that. When you are mailing checks, please use security envelopes. Again, it's really easy to go down to the dollar store and buy the cheap envelopes. However, if you hold a cheap envelope up to the light, you can read an account number through it. So one of the ways to prevent that is either A, to stick a slip of paper in there so that folks can't read your check number or your account numbers through your envelope. Another way is just to buy a security envelope. So a security envelope is an envelope that has that little hashed pattern on the interior of it, and just provides a simple layer of security for those checks. Another option, if you're utilizing a software, is to print the checks directly from your software. So again, you're still going to have to manage a checkbook register. You're still going to have to reconcile, but you can print that check directly from your software, maybe eliminate a couple of steps there. So with that, I know it was a little bit of a shorter webinar today. I am happy to hang around and answer any questions you may have regarding maintaining your checkbook register. So I'm open for questions. You can place them in the chat or in the Q&A. Ryan, unfortunately, we lost your audio.
All right, thank you for letting me know. Too many microphones here. Yeah, thanks for a great presentation. And as we're waiting to see if people do have questions, just want to remind you to fill out the survey that is in the chat box. That is a great help to us to inform your impression of today's webinar, and certainly any ideas that you have for webinars going forward that you might find useful would be very appreciated by us. So that link again is in the chat box. And as always, today's recording will be available on our website at cap.unl.edu/webinars. Check that out. Next Thursday, we'll be back with another webinar on direct marketing meet. We'll have a very interesting panel that will include different perspectives, one from a producer, one from a processor, and one from an industry expert. So that's happening next Thursday at noon. And you can check out registration for that again, as well as an archive of past webinars, including this one at cap.unl.edu. And so, Jessica, I'm not seeing any questions. If you want to hang on, you certainly can, but I think you've explained everything very well. And we'll encourage folks to check out that article again that you've written on our website at cap.unl.edu as well. With that, if you're okay, Jessica, calling it a day, then we'll go ahead and log off. Thank you very much for a great presentation. And thanks to everybody out there for joining us today. Hope you have a great Thursday afternoon. Take care.